Chad Kraft said earlier today at The Athletic, New England's blueprint for the offseason does not include pursuing Tee Higgins, the number one free agent to be on the Athletic's top 150 big board, as the Patriots are reshaped in Mike Vrabel's likeness, which is a nod to Vrabel running the show over Wolf, which we were discussing earlier. They want to prioritize building through the offensive and defensive line, and will make that the number one goal this offseason. They don't think Higgins is worth $30 million a year. I think he's too injury prone, hasn't proven he's the number one guy, et cetera, et cetera. So specifically on one player, it sounds like they're out. And secondarily, I wonder what it means for their spending this offseason and what they'll do at other positions in free agency, because if you're going to hold back on a guy like Tee Higgins, the number one free agent on the Athletics big board, a name we've been talking about for 2 straight years in New England to upgrade the receiver room, if you're not in on him, who are you in on?
So I guess I'll say I don't know this to be a fact, but my hope is that it's not just the money, it's also having to give up a big pick. And therefore, he's on the list of top free agents, but he's not really going to be a free agent.
That's fair. Good point.
And so that changes things, right?
I mean,
so it's like, hey, do you want to give him $30 million?
He hasn't been tagged yet.
No, I know.
So
T-tagged?
He has not been. Yeah, some were calling
some were
it. I think it was trending at one point.
No,
he was T-tagged.
He hasn't
in
been
Cincinnati.
Yet. So maybe he's not. And at that point, I would want them to be back in. If that's the reason to not be, say, hey, we have so many needs, and even if it doesn't ultimately cost a first round or 2 first-round picks, like some of the franchise tag rules are, even if you negotiate with Cincinnati and it's a second-round pick, it's like, or would you rather take that $30+ million? Get it somebody else or spread that around somewhere else and use your second-round pick? I might be more inclined for that because I know they're older, but you can get Devontae Adams for less. You could get Cooper Kupp for less. You could get maybe DK Metcalf for the same, who you like more, who I like a little bit more. So I wonder if that's all part of the equation with Tee Higgins. It's like, do we want to give him $30 million? Well, maybe we could stomach that. But do you want to give up a high draft pick? Probably not. And then the combination. And then it leads to the trenches thing. And if that's how they want to do it, right? Say they, like all of us, watched the Chiefs and the Eagles in the Super Bowl and was like, I know the Eagles have everything, so you can sort of point to, like, well, they also have this, they have that, and they have everything. But the way their defense dominated Patrick Mahomes and the way their offensive line just pushed people around, if that's how you want to build it, I at least get it. But make sure you do that. Make sure you spend the appropriate resources on that and not just try to cheap out and be like, hey, we got some bodies in here. Like, no, I don't want Chukwuemeka again. I want real tackles, left tackle, real defensive tackles, if that's what your plan is.
617-779-7937. You can make your case why Robert Kraft has to spend money this offseason. I'll put you on the clock 30 seconds. Keefe and I, our plans each took 60 seconds. They're up now, or will be shortly, I should say, on social media at Jones and Keefe. You can seek those out. We'll get to, the Patriots giving permission to one defensive lineman to go seek a trade and what that means for the offseason. But real quick on Higgins, 2 things we were talking about earlier today. Well, number one, before we get into it, are you annoyed they're not in? Does it bother you they're not in?
A little bit, just because I think they should see what the cost ends up being. Because we're all speculating as to what the picks might be. We're all speculating as to what the cost might be. They do need a receiver. They have so many needs. They have so many needs that they could really go in a number of directions. And that's why, like, right now, just being out, I think is unfortunate. Now, at the end of this offseason and right before the season starts, if they went big time on, D tackle, O tackle, edge rush, and they don't get the Tee Higgins type, okay, that's fine. But just because you're saying you're out on Tee Higgins does not guarantee that you get any of these other, like, either top 10 free agents or big-time trades.
No, and I guess that what bothers me about them being out is exactly what you just said. It's not that they aren't getting Tee Higgins, who is not my favorite receiver. I question if he's a 1. The injuries, to me, are annoying, and that was in his early and mid-20s. Never mind how's it going to look in his late 20s into his 30s. So he wasn't my top guy. But why are you ruling yourself out this far before free agents?
So you have more cap space than everybody else. Shouldn't you at least be like in the mix for everybody? I can't sign them all, but like you should be at least a player in it.
I don't like that, and I know there's a lot of you who thought Tee Higgins was the number 1 guy. So you guys should be pissed. He wasn't my number 1 guy. I'm less upset about it. But real quick on Tee Higgins, how many? Do you have his numbers in front of you?
Don't
pull them up.
Oh, no, I don't.
I just didn't know if they were up in front of you.
Nope.
How many 75 catch seasons do you think Higgins has had?
2
in his career? 0.
Okay.
Never had 75 catches in a season. How many times has he had 1,000 yards in his career?
1.
He's had it twice in 5 years. It was 1091 and 1029. So he hasn't gotten to 1,100 yards yet.
But just over 1,000
2,000-yard seasons. He got to 911 last year. He did miss time, but that's part of the story with Tee Higgins.
Unfortunately.
He missed 5 games. How many double-digit touchdown seasons do you think he has?
0.
1. He did it last year.
He had 10 touchdowns last year?
Yeah, so I think...
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah, he was a beast in fantasy.
He had 4 in one game.
Yeah,
I think that kind of juiced up people's image of him, quite frankly.
No, see, to me, it's more about potential than it is the numbers. And we've all seen the Bengals play a bunch just because, they not this year, but they had the Super Bowl run. They've had playoff games, so primetime games. It's some of the catches that he makes is stuff that I don't think anybody on their current team can do.
Well,
like some of the goal lines are goal line or contested catches or catches on the sideline. How many times did Patriots players just run out of bounds or have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or not know where they were? Not to get too into it, body control. I would say he's one of the better receivers at that. He's a big target too, and I think would be great for somebody like Drake May. They could just kind of throw it up to him, and he'll make plays for you. He made Joe Burrow look really good. Plus, they have a legitimate number 1 receiver who's going to be better than everybody, maybe short of Justin Jefferson, in the league to be the primary guy.
So, if I'm going to be fair, because I've said I don't know that he's the number 1, it's hard to turn around and rip the numbers when you have a guy like Jamar Chase across the formation from him. So, somebody sent these earlier in the show. I looked these up because my impression was maybe he had one monster game without Jamar Chase. But he's put up 31 catches for 511 and 3 touchdowns in 5 games without Jamar Chase in his career. It was 4 games in 2022 and 1 game in 2023. I mean, you go game by game, 3 for 49 and a touchdown, not great. But then 7 for 60, no touchdowns. 9 for 148, no touchdowns. That's a monster game. 7 for 114 and a touchdown, 5 for 140 and a touchdown. He was pretty productive, I'd say, in 4 out of the 5 games. And in the 5th game, he caught a touchdown. So... Maybe I should give him more credit for being the number 1 guy.
Well, he also led the team in receiving yards his rookie year, and there was no Jamar Chase's rookie year.
Good point. Not, 1,000-yard season, but he was the leading receiver.
I think it was 900, though, and
that was
as
a rookie. So you can jump in. Patriots are out on definitely out on Jamar Chase. Out on Tee Higgins.
They should get in on Jamar Chase.
You can jump in here again at 617-779-7937. The other piece from that Chad Graff story is that the Patriots will, quote-unquote, feel out the trade market for wide receiver. They need to land one of these guys.
Yeah.
Metcalf, Samuel, Kupp, Olave, Pickens. Who else am I missing? Adams, Godwin.
Yep.
And I know all those guys aren't trades, and some of those guys are free agents.
No, they're a little bit different, but they're all better than what you have here.
You need to come out of the draft with one of those guys, or come out of free agency, rather, and go into the draft with one of those guys. If you do, I'm going to be less concerned about missing out on Higgins. If you get none of those guys, none of them, then I'm going to look back and say, why were you already counting yourself out on Higgins before free agency even got underway?
Oh, also note yesterday, and we didn't talk about this because it certainly wasn't the big takeaway or even the second from Elliott Wolf's conversation with the media, but he was asked about position groups in the draft.
Yep.
And one thing he said about the wide receivers, it was meteor
in the middle.
In the middle.
Yeah.
So I would put Travis Hunter to the side because he does view him as sort of 2 positions. But
he said he'd major in one, minor in the other. He didn't say which. He said he'll probably play both positions.
He could do both ways.
Yeah.
So put him to the side. The next couple of guys that are projected to go in the first round, Tet McMillan, and who's your guy again?
I like Luther Burden. By the way, McMillan is supposedly dropping in some of these drafts, is the way it's going.
But the way Wolf phrased that, I would be shocked
if they're taking one.
If they got one of those guys.
Agreed.
Hunter's a different animal, but they're not taking any of those other guys in the first round. I think... Honestly, depending on how many of the receivers you're going to keep from last year's roster, I might not even draft any this year. You have so many young guys, you need to bring in established veteran receivers. But if they were, it seems more like it's going to be early day 3 than anything else.
617-779-7937. Meanwhile, the Patriots have given permission to Devon Godchaux to seek a trade. Whatever, trade him for some mid-round pick. I don't care. I think we talked about him at the trade deadline last year. Friend of the show. We liked him on the show. He was entertaining to talk to.
Chow talk.
Maybe that's part of the problem. He was calling out teammates last year. He called them selfish and freelancing and things like this, and that was with us. So the only reason that caught my attention yesterday from Rap Sheet when he wasn't cowering in a corner from apparently 6'205" Jordan Schultz. That's the feedback we got on the text line.
Schultz, big guy.
Text line is never wrong. When he wasn't cowering in the corner from Jordan Schultz and running to NFL security about not wanting to get beat up, he was tweeting about the Devon Godchaux thing. If you remember a few weeks ago, Curran told us names to keep an eye on that could move from the Patriots this offseason. Godchow.
Mm-hmm.
Check. Already given permission to seek a trade. Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, that was the one. He was more surprising.
It was out of nowhere.
Yeah,
he was just
right.
We weren't asking him about who are they going to trade. He's just by the way, keep an eye on Ramondre Stevenson, Devon Godchow.
Maybe get rid of him. You're like, okay.
And Barmore.
Wow.
So with Stevenson, it's a deep running back draft. Maybe they're just sick of the fumbling, and they'll shop him around, whatever.
Barmore, unfortunately, there's health concerns.
There are, but Barmore and Godchow are both D linemen, and you wonder if they're getting caught up in a schematic shift, or if maybe they're just not good for the locker room, and Vrabel's trying to get his locker room back.
It's funny because individually, when you look at the Patriots' defensive line from last year, you kind of like, or at least, I mean, you might not love anybody, but you like a lot of guys. But then collectively, they gave up so many yards on the ground. They were not that dominant.
No.
But if you were like, hey, do you want Keon White? I'd be like, yeah. Do you want Devon Godchow? I'd be like, yeah. And so.
Do I want Barmore? Yeah.
Oh, and Barmore, right. So, like, those three guys, like, you want all of them. But then there's talks about, like, maybe Jeffrey Simmons, or maybe they draft a guy. And you're like, of all the needs on the team, D-tackle and even running back don't jump out at you. Like, because all we talked about was offensive line and wide receivers all year. And then maybe a corner not named Christian Gonzalez. Like, that's all. Like, those were the big jump out needs. But now as we're getting like closer and closer to the draft and this offseason playing out, it's like, yeah, maybe D-tackle, maybe running back. Like, maybe the positions you thought you were kind of covered, you're not really as covered as you thought.